Are fascists using fascism to censor the definition of fascism to promote fascism? Well, possibly. But to understand that, we would actually have to define fascism. I would say the majority of the general populace can't define it whatsoever and don't know what it is, other than it's bad. You get a little bit larger portion, but rather a small percentage that at least can draw an association with Nazi Germany. However, very, very few people actually know what fascism is and how it works. A little less than a year ago, late March in 2023, I looked it up out of curiosity. I wanted the exact definition. And on the search engine, I had to look through various dictionary sources, and I was finding definitions that weren't actually definitions.
So I'm on my way to the library because I need to find a dictionary that was printed before the internet existed, or at least in the last number of years, because is purposefully redefining a term to screw with culture and politics.
It just said a far-right political movement, and sometimes would say associated with Nazi Germany or Mussolini's Italy. But that's not actually a definition. So fortunately for us, I have darn near every major dictionary since the 1850s, before that time even, and we're going to look at this wisdom up in here and see if we can figure out what the heck it actually is. Because something else that's very fascinating, I recall hearing a long time ago and looked it up. In 1975, Ronald Reagan was quoted as saying, "If fascism ever comes to America, it will come in the name of liberalism." Whoa, hold on. If I'm seeing sources on the internet defining fascism as being a far right-wing movement associated with that, how can that possibly be right if Reagan said that? That must mean there's some sort of structure to the concept of it. So let's dive right in. I'm going to go straight to the Webster's Dictionary from the late 1850s. Now, this is going to be a very quick disappointment because the word's not in here. It doesn't exist at this time. It was simply not here. No definition. I got nothing to show you. Okay, let's move on. All right, we're going up to Webster's New International Dictionary. Now, this particular one, I absolutely love this book. The amount of wisdom in here is tremendous, and the care they took to create this is unbelievable. Truly, I think the early 20th century, and even going the mid-20th centuries, must have been an amazing time. But we have work to do in defining fascism. So in 1911, I hate to tell you guys this, the word is not here. Nothing. We're by fashion and fasciola, a narrow fascia, or band of color. Fascism is not here in the early 20th century. Something tells me this video is going to get spicy. I'm going to need some espresso. Oh yes, time to get very spicy. All right, let's see. We've got Webster's New International Dictionary. Now this is the second edition, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see when this was originally written and this particular book was printed. The printing is less important than when it was done. Now this is 1954, so we may have some luck here because this is indeed right after the Second World War. So certainly I would think the word would be in here, and since they're just coming out of that time, I would like to think that it is going to be defined well. But that's interesting too, because keep in mind that history is written by the victors. So let's see. Fascism, defined in the 50s. Fascism, a political group, a club, a bundle. Okay, let's keep going here. Here we are. 1. The principles of the fascist, also the movement or governmental regime embodying their principles. 2. Any program for setting up a centralized, autocratic national regime with severely nationalistic policies, exercising regimentation of industry, commerce, and finance, rigid censorship, and forcible suppression of opposition. Okay, that's fascinating. Now we're on to something. We have a definition of the concept of this regime, of this political direction, and it gives you some of the nature of the systems and mechanics. So let's read that one more time. Any program for setting up a centralized, autocratic national regime with severely nationalistic policies, severely nationalistic policies, exercising regimentation of industry, meaning government is going to control industry, government, then commerce and finance. Government will control industry, government will control commerce, government will control finance. They're also autocratic, meaning they're going to do whatever the heck they want, the regime. And here's something fascinating: rigid censorship. And forcible suppression of opposition. Rigid censorship. That would go against First Amendment, which is freedom of speech, of course, which I think we're going to dive into at the end of this video. We're going to talk about the nature of this and possibly some things I think we're all seeing out there and talk about it. Let's find out where we are on the fascist scale. Forcible suppression of opposition. What would opposition be? Would those be public figures that speak? Would that be political opposition? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so that was the 1950s, right out of World War II. Now, what's also very interesting about this, this is going to be interesting. You can see the dictionaries are getting less pretty. They're putting less effort and love into the actual book itself, which is such a shame. 1961. So we're not too far off. We're still pretty close to World War II. Fascism. 1. The principles of the fascisti. The movement or governmental regime embodying their principles. 2. Most importantly, any program for setting up a centralized, autocratic national regime with severely nationalistic policies, exercising regimentation of industry, commerce, and finance, rigid censorship, and forcible suppression of opposition. Very similar to the last definition on the 2s. However, we have this B section. Any tendency toward or actual exercise of severe autocratic or dictatorial control as over others within an organization. Very similar, basically the same definition as in the 50s. But let's get up to modern times here. This is the New Oxford Dictionary, and this is the American one, very similar to the English one. I kind of like the English one better, but I checked the definitions and they're essentially the same. Now, let's look at the printing of this because this is very modern. And let's think about what time these are printed in here. And not just printed, but if they are in fact updated. First edition, second edition, third edition. What do we have here? Third edition, 2010. Interesting. Modern times, but before the internet was hardcore into swing. Fascism. Authoritarian or nationalistic right-wing system of government and social organization. In general use, extreme right-wing, authoritarian, or intolerant views or practice. That's fascinating. There's so much less there to define the mechanics of what it is. But if you notice, what's been added is that it's right-wing, or at least that's what they're putting here. And what's even more fascinating is they wrote right-wing twice in 4 lines. Seems redundant. They're really hitting that home. But in this larger part here, they give you some historical context, which they do elsewhere. But in this circumstance, the term fascism was first used of the totalitarian right-wing nationalist regime of Mussolini in Italy, 1922 to 1943, and the regimes of the Nazis in Germany and Franco in Spain were also fascist. Fascism tends to include a belief in the supremacy of one's national or ethnic group, a contempt for democracy, an insistence on obedience to a powerful leader, and a strong demagogic approach. Why are they putting that in here now in modern times? But in the Big Beautiful Books then, it wasn't written. It's giving historical context. But let's read this again. Authoritarian or nationalistic, I'm going to remove right-wing. Authoritarian and nationalistic system of government and social organization. Authoritarian or intolerant views or practice. If you remove where it says right-wing, there's not much definition here. Now what's fascinating, if you remove right-wing, they also wrote authoritarian twice. Man, that is nutty. Okay, so let's get rid of if you get rid of right-wing and you get rid of the redundancy, all you've got is authoritarian, nationalistic system of government and social organization. Extreme, with intolerant views or practice. All it does is say is authoritarian and nationalistic. It's extreme and it's intolerant in their views and practice. That's a very poor definition. But they added right wing. That's where it's getting weird. Because back in March of last year, I looked it up on a very prominent search engine that may or may not own the platform I'm speaking to you on now. So I will not name it because I don't want the fascists to use fascism to censor my video to promote fascism, just in case that's actually a thing and Ronald Reagan might be right. But when I saw it, you can look up the definitions through the search engine, but it'll you know those things that come up, like some people ask, and it'll put like questions or ideas or things there regardless of what you search for. But the truth of the matter is those things aren't actually what people are looking for. It's what the search engine wants you to see or thinks you ought to look at. I know that from doing YouTube for the last 5 years and looking at things relating to myself and others and racing and industry as it relates to everything we're doing. Nobody's actually searching for those things. That's what the search engine wants you to see. And at the time, the search engine put up that it was an extreme right-wing movement relating to Nazi Germany and Mussolini. That was it. But that's not a real definition. Let me give you an example. If, under the same circumstance, I wanted to define what an automobile was, they could write something like this. A machine owned and operated by people that don't care enough about the environment. Okay, that would parallel what the search engine was wanting you to see. But that doesn't tell you what an automobile is. It doesn't tell you it's a method of transportation. It doesn't tell you how it goes anywhere or who uses it and how many people or what it does. It tells you nothing. It doesn't define it. And what I'm seeing here is, if you look at the most modern definition that we just went over, where they added the historical context and wrote right-wing in here twice within 4 lines and barely told us anything, the actual definition of and mechanics of what the political social concept is shrinking to a point where we no longer know what it is. And to only actually understand what fascism is, we have to go back 70 years to right after World War II when they actually defined the damn thing. I'm going to read it again. Fascism. Come back here. Where are you? I miss you. Not true at all. I'm being ridiculous. It's a word in a book, and I can't find it because there's a lot of words on this book. Thank God I'm nearsighted, and I have contacts. I still can't see, and I had an espresso. I think it's kicking in. Fascism. Any program for setting up a centralized, autocratic, national regime with severely nationalistic policies, exercising regimentation of industry, commerce, and finance, rigid censorship, and forcible suppression of opposition. Boom. That's really what fascism is, right there. So, we've gone through the dictionaries, and I think we need to talk about this because in our time right now, in the United States of America, we are seeing a lot of those things happening. Now, I am not right now going to say where I'm seeing them happening, or what side of the aisle I'm seeing them happening far more. But I will tell you this. Everybody, even the people that don't want to admit it, realize that the internet and social media platforms are highly censored. Freedom of speech is in polar opposition to fascism. Fascism relies on extreme censorship. Freedom of speech is the opposite of it. Freedom of speech is the United States' First Amendment. Freedom of speech is the most powerful defensive weapon against fascism. Where do we see the front line of the war on freedom of speech right now? What platform? Who's the general leading the charge? And who is it that's trying to censor? And if you think of those who are censoring, how are they trying to regiment industry? How are they trying to regiment commerce? How do they talk about people of different levels of wealth or business power? How do they talk about finances? How are they censoring? Again, think of the social media platforms. The censorship comes in the form and the name of what? It's for you to decide. And forcible suppression of opposition. Those could be talking heads. Those could be political opponents. What political opponents do we see out there now that are being forcibly opposed? Forcibly suppressed. Every way, shape, and form. Or maybe we don't see it at all. That's for you to look at and decide. You know, it would be nice if we could go back to not needing to really know what the definition of this is. To living in such a nice country and world and civilization that we can go live our daily lives and talk to people about what we think. Hang out, live, have a great time. But we don't live there right now. And this isn't that time. And I think it's all important that we understand the definition of this, because it's going to jump up and bite us in the ass. Frankly, it's already nibbling on our thighs pretty hard. It would seem to me that when you know what it is, you know that that can be employed and used by any political movement, by any ideological direction, with any basic principles. You just need total control. You just need to make everybody shut up and not get to say anything that opposes you. And you need to take control of everything and everybody in the name of what you believe in. Those are all the things the United States of America was set up to keep out. I think we need to try harder. Comment below. But we've defined it here, and now that we have done so, this will be the beginning of a playlist, because I'm sure examples of this may pop up from time to time around the world, or possibly even here in the United States of America. So hopefully we can keep the fascists from biting us in the ass, push them back down so they're not nibbling on our leg, and maybe at worst every now and then they kind of just nip at our ankles like a nasty little chihuahua or a Pomeranian. Let's not be racist to dogs. I hope we've learned something, and use that wisdom how you like. I really can't take any credit for it. I just read the dictionary, which is fascinatingly powerful and debunks most idiotic politicians. Ugh, I'm getting middle-aged, burping through my talking. I got lots to do. I'm going to be up until 2 in the morning. See ya.